right, guys, so today we're going to talk about the cycle of conquest and colonization. Basically, how colonization got started and how it actually kind of worked a little bit and some of the effects of it. We've already talked about the explorers. We've talked about what made the explorers go, where they wanted to go. So now, today, we're going to talk about how this cycle of conquest works. So whenever a country in Europe would send out people to go somewhere, they had to do a couple things first. One, they had to send out explorers. Obviously, you got to send out people to figure out what's where and all the things like that. You got to figure out what's going on and who you're going to be encountering and how you're going to be dealing with it, just so you become familiar with an area. Two, second step in the conquest are conquistadors or conquerors. These were the guys that, especially the Spanish, sent out, and the Spanish sent out and said, you know what, we're gonna conquer the Aztecs or the Incans or any of these other groups, and we're gonna take their land away from them by force if we have to. Third thing that they sent out were missionaries. They said, okay, those are the ones that we conquered. Now we want to convert them and kind of subjugate them or force them under us to do what we want, by forcing them into our religion. Not really forcing them, but convincing them, hey, you got beat. Maybe your gods weren't quite as good as our gods, so here's our religion, and we're going to convert you culturally that way. Well, after those first three steps, then you sent your permanent settlers. These were your farmers. These were the guys that were going in and building the roads. These were the people who were going in and setting up the farms so that you could actually get crops out of them. These were the miners that were going in and running the mines to pull out the gold. Okay, the native peoples were the ones that ended up working on these farms and plantations and all that stuff initially, but you had to have people run and organize things, and so that was that. And then boom, you finally set up an official European colony. You had your own government system. You had local governments here in the Americas that answered or did whatever the government back in Europe wanted them to do. And so that's kind of how that cycle of conquest and colonization works. So step one was explorers, step two is conquistadors, three is missionaries, four is permanent settlers, and boom, five is the official European colony. So take a couple of minutes right there and just take a look at where those colonies are. You're going to see that the Spaniards are right here in what we now call Mexico. The Spanish are there. They also go down in Peru. You'll notice that the Portuguese that you guys talked about, looked at earlier, were here on the eastern coast of Brazil, and that's really all that they were. The Dutch were way up here, and they called it New Amsterdam or New Netherlands. That would eventually become part of the United States and a British colony. The English, obviously, we know where the English were. And so those are the major ones that you guys need to know about. One last one are the French right here in Haiti. They're pretty important later on when we talk about independence movement. So let's talk about what are some of the major impacts or effects of European expansion into the New World. Well, first of all, the native populations get destroyed by diseases. At the time of European exploration into the Americas, there were lots and lots of people in the Americas. Within a short time span, I don't remember the exact times off the top of my head, but within a short time span, the population was decimated, I want to say, by a third or a half. And so very few native people actually live in the Americas anymore because of diseases from Europe coming over and ravaging them. Okay, two, the influx of gold and silver from the Americas into Europe made their money worth less. It's a simple question of supply and demand. Supply went up, therefore demand went down, and therefore value in the money went down. And so it was more expensive to buy things. It caused inflation. Things cost more. Okay. Two, Spain and Portugal actually saw depopulation. Their population shrunk because so many people went to the New World from Spain and Portugal on the Iberian Peninsula. The next thing is new products were introduced across the continent. There's something called the Colombian Exchange, and I'll show you a diagram of that here in a second, where some goods went to the New World from the Old World, and some goods went from the Old World to the New World. And we're not just talking about goods. We're talking about animals. We're talking about plants, vegetables, fruits, things like that. And we're also talking about diseases, and that really had a negative impact on the Americas as well. It did the Europeans as well, but not quite as much. And we'll come back to the fifth reason in just one second. But let's take a look at this Colombian Exchange. I've got 3 continents here that you'll notice simply because later on tomorrow we'll talk about the triangle trade. And so what we're going to see here is here's how the triangle works. So coming from the New World to the Old World, the ones that are really important are in red here. Squash, turkey, you can read those. I'm not going to read those to you. But something that had a tremendous impact was potatoes, tobacco, and the tomatoes. Europeans actually were very skeptical of tomatoes. It was actually believed that you could be poisoned by eating a tomato. They thought that it was evil. Initially, myth had it that the tomato was the apple that Eve ate, and so that tomatoes were evil. Potatoes, an entire country lost a good chunk of their population. Ireland lost a good chunk of their population because of the potato and their reliance on the new product, the potato, because it was very healthy. You could do a lot with it, and we'll read some things about the potato later. And then the tobacco. Tobacco obviously came from the New World to the Old World and caused a boom in tobacco consumption. So going from the Old World to Africa were trinkets, just simple little jewelry type stuff. Liquor went there, and then guns. And what were those guns traded for? Slaves. And there are a couple of things that went from this Old World picture here to the New World. Onions, bananas, you see all that. Now, significant to note are these diseases. These diseases played a tremendous impact on depopulating the Americas and had a caused a lot of harm there. But coming from the Old World that kind of helped the Americas were rice, citrus fruits. Cattle and horses are something that I need to mention because we always picture the American Native Americans, American Indians, riding on horses. Well, they didn't have horses before the Europeans brought them here. And so that's a concept that is kind of hard for us to wrap our brain around. Coffee beans also came from the Old World. That's really important to me because I drink a lot of coffee. All right, so let's go back and let's talk about the final impact here. Is because of the age of European expansion, one of the main impacts on Europe was national rivalries. What we're going to notice in the next kind of unit as we're moving on is the countries begin to compete, and they really essentially get into a giant fight with one another over land and over who controls the most land. And that glory thing that I talked about earlier, well, that comes back and that plays an important role because now you're trying to gain glory for your country. Okay, that's all for today. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll learn about the African slave trade.